Okay, I think we're live. I think we're live, people. Yep, bars are green and things are looking really good. Hello, everyone. How are we all today? It is I, your favorite archery instructor on YouTube. NUSensei, yeah, I did check if I was there. Hi, how are we all? Man, it has been a while since my last archery video, surprisingly. I say this a lot in my live streams because it's winter here. Obviously, the days are shorter and there's less time for me to actually film videos. So apart from handling the normal stresses of schoolwork, that's other schoolwork, not like going to school, but the other side of the job, and doing stuff at the club, it's just really hard to find time to actually get things done. I mean, some people wonder how I get things done in the first place, and that's a really good thing to wonder about. So I fortunately do have school holidays now, so I have some time off. So I can finally start catching up and get through some of the backlog that I've had for like the last few months. I've been generating video ideas for the last like 3 months relentlessly, but I've had no time to actually shoot or make videos. I'll point this out later on in the Q&A that most of my stuff has been either doing schoolwork or doing my own shooting and rather than making videos. So yeah, you might see my channel has a lot of like game related stuff stacked up for the last couple of weeks. It's mostly because I haven't had time to actually film new content for the archery side. But I'll be doing more of that over the next couple of weeks with more time, including a new bow build. I'm currently testing and previewing a brand new riser, which isn't on the market yet, but I've got nothing to go with it. So I'm going to actually set up an entire secondary target Olympic style kit with a moderate price range. It's a demonstration bow rather than take apart my competitive bow for video purposes. So you'll get a preview of a new bow. It's from Toe Point. It's not on their website or catalog. It's a brand new release. I actually have a riser from the first batch they manufactured, flaws and all. So we'll be seeing that over the next couple of weeks, hopefully. Like I said, my plan is to basically build and tune a bow from scratch. So that way, people who want to ask about how to set up, how to tune, I can actually do so without messing up my actual bow, which I use normally. So that's my future project. Yeah, it took me a while to figure out, by the way, what exactly the stream was. I'm kind of like I've been a little disorientated over the last few days. I shot really poor. I mean, I had this really big peak, but I was shooting really well. And then last Saturday, I shot really poorly, and I wasn't really in the mood. It kind of bummed me out. And actually, this week I've been a little feverish, so I'm not ill as far as I know, but I'm having some symptoms of like fatigue or work related stress, or some sort. So. A few things which have been happening. So I've been sleeping it off, and I'm still a little disorientated. I'm wondering, is this the form check video, or is this the Q&A? So I do have enough content to look at the form checks soon. I'm not sure it'll be like this weekend, but it'll be happening over the next couple of weeks, definitely. So we can finally see some form checks live and do some more Q&A. But this is our monthly Q&A. This is what we do every month. For those who are just joining me, this is the archery Q&A. Every month we take questions from the viewership, and we get questions about archery, and we'll do some miscellaneous questions, including questions live from the chat. I'm sure someone asked, what's today's archery juice? It is a matcha latte or a green tea latte, so that'll be something which I'll enjoy somewhat as the tea cools down. But let's take a few quick questions from the chat. I've got stuff from YouTube and Facebook, but we'll go through some of the live questions now. A couple of things. Firstly, Mantelli, any suggestions on how to practice and improve release? Practicing release, so that's a good one actually. There are a few training tools like shot trainers If you're interested in actually spending money, things like the Astra Shot Trainer can be set up to connect to your bow or bow string, so that way you can actually release the bow without actually destroying it through dry fire. So you might use a shot trainer. That's something you can do, but a lot of time it's I do this a lot when I'm off the line. Just basically getting the idea of the relaxation there. So a lot of it doesn't need specific training to do, although that can definitely help if you have a shot trainer. But I find that it's something, the more you do, practice and archery in general, then the more naturally it comes. So that's something which you might think about, is just either getting a shot trainer or just more practice. But especially perfect practice. You need to either know what you're doing right or have someone observe you and tell you if you're doing it wrong. The saying that practice makes perfect is not actually true in archery or anything. It's perfect practice makes perfect. So whenever you practice, you may or you should have someone observe you, make sure you're doing correctly, and repeat that 1,000 times. So that's something to keep in mind. Niall, my YouTube name, I've explained this in a few Q&As in the past. The NUSensei, it's a combination of two things. The first two letters, the NU, are actually my work initial. So you know how employees have a code or some kind of sequence? My original employee sequence was NU. It's derived from my last name. It's not my initials. But for the school timetable, I was originally registered as NU. Now we move on to a three-letter system. It's NUD, which doesn't sound as good, but back then it was NU. And I'm a high school teacher, so sensei means teacher in Japanese. So that's a combination of new sensei. Next question. Looking for a new bow, Daniel Corey. Any recommendations? Yeah, get. I can't answer the question. Everyone always keeps asking me, like, what do you recommend? I can't answer that because, like, it just depends what you want to do. So my general advice is go for a bow you like and a bow you can afford. That's it. Unless you have something specific to look into, then there's really nothing for me to advise you on. Just buy something you can use. No point buying a real expensive bow if you can't use it. So be reasonable with your draw weight. That's the main thing to watch out for. It's what kind of bow. It's what you like to shoot. If you have a particular style in mind, then go for the bow that you like, that you look for, and you go, oh wow, I want this bow. It's like buying a car or buying a bicycle. It's like, what's the difference here, right? So most people will go for an aesthetic look. If you feel a connection to it, you'll probably enjoy it more. Yeah, that's my general advice for buying. Morton, not much. I've just started literally 6 minutes ago or something, so not a whole lot here. Hi, Stephanie from Canberra. How do I get back into archery after a shoulder injury? That's this really depends on the extent of your shoulder injury. A lot of people will slowly get back into it, but depends on the extent of the damage you've incurred, and how much range of motion you have. So I don't really have any general feedback here. Many people will start from a light bow again, recover a range of movement, and regain strength. And once they feel more confident, they will slowly go back up to a higher draw weight. So that's one thing you got to watch out for, is not stressing yourself or your shoulders so that you re-injure yourself. That's obviously not a desirable thing. But I recommend going from a low draw weight, going from the basics again, and build up strength over time. That's probably the thing which, even if you do shoot very well already, you need to give yourself time to recover. And of course, if problems persist, do see your physician. Don't trust some random Asian guy on the internet. Actually have some professional advice. So a coach and or a physician would be I recommend, depending on how serious your comeback is. But it's not impossible to come back from a shoulder injury. It's actually very common. People get injured not from archery necessarily, but from other reasons. Road accidents especially tend to be quite common. So if you are recovering from an injury, then yeah, take care of your muscle conditions. What draw it would I recommend? Depends on what you currently shoot, right? But it's like going back. When I say go back to basics, I mean literally go back to the basics. Make sure you can shoot from a lighter draw weight. In fact, one of our former club members, she actually injured her shoulder from doing weight training. She normally shot maybe a 25, 30 pound bow, and she was doing the dumbbell lifts. And one thing she did, she popped her shoulder here, agonizing. It really stopped her. She couldn't lift her arm up above here, and that was really agonizing for her. So what she did, she basically bought the lightest possible limbs. I think she got like 12 pound limbs or something. It's really ridiculously low. Like it was so low, we couldn't find like the limbs for it that could fit her ROF because you can't buy like 12 pound limbs. But we've managed to find some really light limbs, 12, 14 pound limbs. If that's too low for you, then go like anything under 20, 25 ish maybe. Again, depends on what you currently shoot. But going from a 20-ish pound draw weight from the very beginning can help you recover, firstly, your form, secondly, your condition, and thirdly, your confidence. Those are what I would recommend. Sebastian, you had a question before up there. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, more training, yeah, more practice. Jin 201, can overdrawing cause string wiggle? I'm not sure what you mean by string wiggle. If you can clarify that question, I can get back to that. Overdrawing does cause a couple of problems, but I'm not sure what the string wiggle you are thinking about specifically is. Evening to Bubbly Book. Love your name always. NATO Tarik. I just got my first bow after shooting with a Club 20 pound bow. And you can totally see why you don't start over 30 pound. Yes, very good, Tarek. Again, so many people will like start with 30 pound by default because it's kind of like what we recommend as a balance point. The reason why I recommend 30 pound for a first bow, I don't recommend it for beginners. I recommend it for as a first bow because when you buy a bow, you're spending money, okay? Now, if you didn't have to spend money to use a bow, like you're borrowing someone's bow or a club bow, then you have a much greater range of options. You start from light and you progress gradually over time. But people who want to spend money are a lot more conservative about spending cash because you don't want to waste money on a bow which you'll grow out of very quickly. That's why the 30 pound recommendation is there. It's there because it's a balance between your budget and how much you use it. But if you have the opportunity to use a lighter bow, man, start from 20 pound, from 25 pound, no more than that. I just wouldn't recommend buying a 25 pound bow because people will get out of it very quickly. But it depends what you do. Again, many people just want to shoot a bow, so 25 pound is fine. If you have the mentality where it's too light, if once you actually use the bow and start hitting things, the macho-ness of using a heavy bow kind of goes away. Shooting heavy bows will come as you feel more like I want to take it more seriously. Whereas it's not a matter of how strong you are, but how experienced you are with the sport. So yes, Tarek's experience is absolutely spot on. Yeah, I don't recommend over 30 pound. We get new people all the time turning out with like 40, 45 pound bows, and we see people who can barely use a 25 pound bow. And we always like put one of our club bows into their hands, a 20 pound bow or a 25 at most. So that way we can get a feel for what their form is. And if their form isn't very good, then they can shoot their own bow once or twice. But you really can't learn if you're struggling with the bow. You cannot fight the bow and expect to gain benefits of learning good form. That's really important. So for anyone who's starting archery and you've already bought your own gear, then that's actually a really bad choice. I've actually had one of our recent club visitors and perhaps new club member. He actually got put off because a visiting instructor kind of said they called him an idiot and stupid for buying his own bow before completing his course. That was I think it was a misunderstanding, but it's a very common thing that instructors and coaches see, that people just jump the gun. They buy a bow before they know what they can use it for. And it's really frustrating because many people actually do this. I know this guy had the right intention. He bought it was a beautiful bow. It was the Hoyt Buffalo, the Hoyt Buffalo, which is a really nice bow. And I had the chance to shoot it. Beautiful bow. I mean, Hoyts are great bows in general, but the Hoyt Buffalo was a particularly good bow. It's a bit old now, but a classic bow. And definitely seen some screen time in the movies. So it's a nice bow. It wasn't a really high draw. It was like 35 pound or something. It was pretty reasonable. But it's a bit higher for beginner. But he was pretty reasonable. I thought it was a good purchase. But for many people who buy their own bow without any consultation, it's a mistake. Just be careful of that. Hi to those joining me, by the way. Morton, David Novak. Nice to see you again. Kevin plus 3, of course. Really looking forward to seeing more of your videos. Like the more you make stuff, the more consistent you are, the more people will watch it. So keep it up. We always want more content on YouTube from different kinds of archers. I've had people ask me about like YouTube advice and how to start off, and considering I'm going to hit like 100k like by the end of the year, like I've made some progress in the YouTube scene, but I really want to see more people start making stuff. We need more diversity in our creators and people sharing knowledge, and hopefully like the stuff that I do is going to generate inspiration and more people taking over and covering niches which I don't cover, and hopefully more and more people will take this on. What do I teach, Mantelli? I am a history teacher. I also teach English literature as well as Vietnamese language, which is a bit surprising. So that's what I mostly do. Okay, Arnis, if you're thinking of buying a lighter bow to get your form back, any tips for buying a used bow? Buy any bow you want. Just like a bow is a bow. If you're only using a bow for form, then you don't need to spend big money on a bow. I mean, you can buy a brand new bow for a very low price, or you can buy a used bow. You don't need to. I mean, the main thing to watch out for is to make sure that it's in good condition. If it's secondhand or used and it's been stored poorly, then obviously it's not gonna perform as well and it might be damaged and might be really bad. But if you are able to inspect the bow, then get the bow that you want to use. Yes, Tony, school's finished. That's right. And there we go. So, have I done any hunting for my bow, Tom? No, I don't hunt. I've got hunting style bows, but I personally don't hunt. I have no interest in hunting. I'm quite content with going to the supermarket to buy my food. I've nothing against hunting. I think people who hunt and do it properly have a right to do so. It's easy to judge sitting in a couch on an armchair what other people do. I'd rather not do that, but I personally don't hunt. I'm not really interested in doing so. There was a question from consoles. What spine do you use on your shafts? Depends on what I'm using. I've got several. I've got every range of bow from like 25 pound to 50 pound. So I've got several different sets of arrows, and I'll be buying more arrows as I get more bows to test out. So depends on what I'm using. So spines are based on your draw weight and among other things. So I don't use one arrow for everything. I use many arrows, and some will cross over to different bows depending on what I'm doing. Cold weather, you have like hot drinks, which is really good. They hit the spot. That is a green tea latte or matcha latte. Japanese matcha green tea, wonderful stuff. Really love that flavor. I mean, it's a slight bitterness, but the latte is slightly sweeter. So nice, a perfect combination. You can see why a lot of people love it. They really get into matcha. So let's go to our prepared questions. I had a lot of people ask me questions, so thanks for the initial batch of live questions. We'll go back to the live questions a bit later. So let's go to our prepared questions, and we will see our initial Q&A responses. So first we'll go to our Facebook site. So Rob Mann has a very good opening question. How proficient can someone realistically expect to get at recurve archery if they've never picked a bow up until their 30s, 40s, or 50s? Also, when a good coach says they can see some really big potential in a novice archer, what is it they see? Are there certain things that a gifted beginner would do better than the average beginner? Thanks for your time. beautiful question. Oh wow, that's loaded. Okay, we'll take the first question. How good can you be potentially if you start late? Um, you are only about Tony. Yes, we are open tomorrow, so feel free to come. I won't be the instructor on the line. I'll be like trolling people on the other line, but feel free to come. Actually, I might help out anyway. Um, Oh, Jin, the string wobbling from right to left. No, that is not a result of an overdraw. That would be a result of your release being botched. An overdraw causes other problems, but it isn't inherently going to affect the string going side to side. That's a release problem. Back to the question. Sorry. The first question was, how good can you potentially get? Now, understand that most competitive archers are young. Yes, that is generally because young people start earlier and they have more time to commit to archery. It doesn't mean you have to be young to do well. Many very good shooters are in their 30s or 40s, and some will retain it to their 50s. Now, when you start late, that's a very good point to make. How far you go, because archery isn't so much based on your physicality, you can actually progress and become extremely competent if you have the time to invest in practice. I think that realistically, the main limitation is how much time you have to invest in a sport that you want to become good at. Again, in your 30s, you might have family, you have job, and you don't have much money, so you can't like dedicate time away from your current commitments to advance in archery. I think that's what holds people back. But if you were able to dedicate a sufficient amount of time to train regularly, not once a week, but multiple times a week, 3, 4, or more times a week, then there's no reason why you can't be as good as someone who started in their teens. And you have the advantage of life experience, and hopefully through that, patience and focus. You have a slight edge, and I think archery rewards that patience. I think the older you are, the more you carry with you, but that means that you can be more selective, and you can use your life experience to guide you in your archery a bit more. So people in the older years, I mean, 40s and 50s a bit different because your muscles are already past their prime, so you might not advance in your draw weight as proficiently as somebody else who is starting younger. People still shoot to their 40s and 50s and past that, but if you started late, then it's unlikely you'll be using a heavier draw weight, because if you haven't conditioned yourself to shoot frequently, then you won't really gain strength in your mid years or later years. So people who shoot in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, or even 70s, they've been already doing it for quite a while. But it doesn't mean you can't start. But if you're starting at say 50, then your chances of being an elite Olympic archer probably won't be realized, because it's got the time factor, as well as the realistically how much strength and stamina you can push out of your body, especially if you haven't done any kind of sport or physical activity. So you need a baseline, in my opinion. When you're young, you can start from any place, and you can build up to it. But when you're older, if you don't already have a background in physical strength conditioning or sport, then it's hard for you to acquire that in older years. Another question, which the second part of the question was, what do we, David Novak is especially good at talking about supporting people with disabilities and coming in, especially with old seniors. David, feel free to spam your website or your service here, because I think you've done a great job of helping people getting into sport, helping them out with like activities. Absolutely important that you understand that being older or being physically disabled doesn't mean you can't get into archery. Archery is one of the sports where people can do it as young as 6 or 7 and shoot up to 60 or 70. I mean, we have a classification for competitive archery which is like 70 plus. You're gonna war for turning up. If you live long enough at 70 still shooting, you deserve a medal. In fact, World Archery just started their Masters division, so anyone above 40 or 50 years old can go to Masters games and shoot outside of the pro circuit. And in fact, one of our local shooters, Dawn, Nelson Fennell broke 2 world archery records for the Masters division, so she'll be shooting the Masters games later on. So yeah, absolutely. Like some people, a lot of people shoot from a young age, but doesn't mean you can't start shooting. And as long as you, you actually take it up for a good reason, then you go as far as you can. That's really the message I have for that. The second part of the question was, what do coaches see when we say someone has that talent or that ability or that potential? Like for example, I as an instructor or a coach will recognize people have that look and feel. I see some people have the potential. What do I look for? The main thing I look for is how quickly they pick up process. That's actually one of the big things, especially with kids and if anyone, but kids, you see a greater disparity. It's like, when you see someone who is athletically gifted, they can run really fast and they can do like record to every event they compete in. Archery is kind of like that, where you have a certain sense that they can acquire it correctly. And I have one student in mind at the club who is progressing quite well. His progress isn't like stellar. It's not like he's a prodigy, but he picked up the basics quite quickly. And that's what I think what people say when we look for the potential of an archer when they're starting out is the fundamentals. The thing with most people who start archery is that they are focused on hitting bullseyes. They're trying really hard to hit bullseyes. They become target fixated. But the people who are process driven, not target driven, tend to make rapid progress. So, for example, average person might be shooting and hit the gold one to go, yeah, hit gold, and take a photograph with a cell phone. But you see, like the other kid who is just patiently going through the steps. They actually listen to your advice. They're getting the feel of the string, the stance, and they're getting the shoulders right. They'll shoot once and they're getting the gold, and then they'll do the same thing. And you see them actually mentally thinking about what they're doing, and they're articulating the process in their mind. And that's actually one of the really big things which sets apart people who learn quickly from those who take long to learn. That is an understanding of the importance of process. Archery is not accuracy driven in the sense where you must be accurate when you start. It is driven by process. And those who have that focus, discipline, and patience will exhibit a faster learning rate than others. That's what we call potential. People who learn this early on tend to go further. Not necessarily sooner or faster, but they tend to go further because they've built the right fundamentals of proper archery form. That's what I think the question was. Like, what's potential? It is. I mean, everybody has potential to become good at archery. Archery doesn't require a special set of skills. It's not like you need to be athletically gifted or physically well conditioned to do archery. These things you can acquire with time and practice and patience. But what we do look for potential, and again, everyone has great potential, but the talented shooters seem to have an eye for what they're doing. They have a better resonance, I guess, like a self-reflection, that they feel what they do, they understand what they do and how to fix their shot. And when they're in tune with their process, then they're more likely to progress and shoot well later on. And there are other things too, but that's really what we'll look for potential. Sorry, quick questions on the live chat there. Yes, Roger's a good example. Starting at age 55. Yeah, your expectations will be different. But you will surprise yourself if you actually try to shoot competitively, and you actually, like, you might wipe the floor with some of the young kids because like you have that patience and that the veteran kind of like status. So depends on what your goals are, but you definitely still can shoot proficiently. Koopy, how do we know the size of the limbs that would fit our riser? If you're using an IOF bow or riser and you're using IOF limbs, every IOF riser will fit every IOF limb. It's a standard. It's not actually a standard, but it's basically a universal standard. If your limbs and riser are not IOF, they may not match. If you're using a traditional bow, for example, most traditional bows and their limbs only fit their own model. So your own model will fit the right model. But if you're using IOF, then they're universal fit. There are some exceptions, but they're generally all universal. Um, Thongs or jandals? Ugh. Neither, honestly. I don't wear thongs or jandals. I mean, apart from being at home, but really, that's not. Wow, yeah. Anyway, let's go back to our question. So that's a great question from Rob. Okay, next one is another good question here, Jennifer. Why does traditional archery and instinctive shooting seem to be so unpopular? And her example here is I shoot traditional. I went to a very large 3D shoot this weekend, and I was constantly asked two questions. One, how did you do? And the next question is always, when will you upgrade to a compound bow? Is compound shooting really considered more advanced than traditional style shooting? The answer is actually no. This really depends on your region. Some regions, some countries, or basically some regions, tend to be more one way than the other. It's just it's just what happens. It depends on what's available, what shops and what services are available. Some places are very compound centric. Others are very traditional centric. For example, like on the internet, traditional shooting has a disproportionate representation. There are probably more compound shooters in the open market than there are traditional shooters. Yet we see traditional shooters have a bigger voice on the internet. So from my side, it's quite the opposite. We get hit a lot, like the Olympic recurve gets hated on a lot by trad shooters. But I've heard of trad shooters getting flack from compound shooters, but on the internet it tends to be the other way around because they hate like this modern space age stuff. So I don't find it to be an accurate generalization. So it depends on where you're from. So yeah, I don't think there is a traditional an anti-traditional bias. I think the bias is depends on where you're from. Why it happens? People are elitist dickheads. That's my only explanation. This happens in any hobby, any sport, and it covers any discipline. Like there are always people who feel insecure about what they do, so they try to prop themselves up by talking down on somebody else for doing something different. It doesn't matter what you do. It's always going to be, oh, you play this game on the easy mode, and I play on hard mode. Therefore, I'm better than you. Or in the case of archery, oh, you shoot compound, I should trad. Therefore, I'm better than you. A lot of people have the inferiority complex. Therefore, they try to make themselves feel better and look better by looking down on somebody else. Related note is the Cunning-Druger effect. That's when people who think they are, well, who aren't as good, have an inflated sense of their ability level, and again, they'll justify themselves as I shoot with a less well equipped bow, and I shoot as good as you, therefore I'm better than you. A lot of it is so much between it's between what people perceive as skill. And yeah, I don't think Jennifer's case is unique. I think many people have reported very similar encounters with elitists. I personally haven't seen it. Personally myself, I haven't seen that attitude. But then again, I kind of I really shut down that elitist bullcrap in my kind of area of influence. I'm not interested in what's better or worse. I mean, to the point now where people say, "Oh, your style is wrong because blah blah blah." What's my style these days, right? And I shoot everything from Olympic to trad longbow to like Mongolian horsebow. So what's my style? In the end, archery is the same. What you use is like the cherry on top, right? If you're using a compound or a recurve, what does it matter? You're doing archery. So my advice for you is look, ignore the haters, ignore the people who are trying to pull off elitist attitudes, and just do what you do. And if they make fun of you, laugh it off. It's they've got training wheels, so who cares? The Dunning-Kruger effect. Sorry, I said Cunning-Druger. Dunning-Kruger effect. Yeah. All right. Next question is, let's see. Prashant, I can't really define tungsten and stainless apart from the density and weight of the point. This is significant for top level. Tungsten's very expensive compared to stainless steel. but you get much more consistency and density. I can't provide the answer that you're looking for here. So this is a bit more advanced than what I would recommend I would talk about. So you might want to talk about to a more experienced coach. This I can't provide exact details on. I'm sorry, Prashant. Edric, are there any archery disciplines that you have never tried but interested in trying? Which ones and why? It'll probably be speed shooting, basically, and not like Lars Anton style, but more like the traditional Turkish or the Chinese styles where it really is natural shooting. There's a video which was shared by an archery club where there's a Chinese guy. He was basically doing the speed shooting with the arrows in the bow hand, not the drawing hand, and just repeatedly doing. So that sort of thing I would like to become more proficient at. I mean, I suppose I could practice it, but I don't have opportunity to do so. But that I think would be the ideal is some kind of natural thumb draw speed shooting technique, and I would like to. Yeah, and not the stunt shooting, just the speed aspect, and speed comes with practice. So that's probably what I am looking forward to. If I had to choose a style which I don't normally shoot. There's Kudo as well, but I'm actually not interested in Kudo. I tried Kudo once, and there's an opportunity later on for me to try, but I've seen it before. I'm not really interested in trying it again. I don't think Kudo is my sort of thing. It's meditative, it's ceremonial, it's driven by like tea ceremony stuff. So I really enjoyed the experience, but I don't think I would practice it. I think I am target driven to an extent. So yeah. I wouldn't mind some kind of historical style, like for example the Kumiyumi, the Koshiya Kumiyumi, which is the battlefield Japanese archery. But I don't live in a place which has it. I mean, it's a Japanese battlefield archery. Therefore, you go to Japan, and there are a few schools which teach it. But obviously, in Australia, we don't have an archery history, so it's a little different here. I mean, if you live in like Europe or America. Or Asia, you get more exposure to the traditional styles of archery. For example, horse archery or other forms of traditional archery. I don't have that exposure. Vietnam does not have an archery history. Mostly it's crossbows, by the way. Same with China, like crossbows were very popular. Bows, not as much. And Australia as a continent doesn't have an archery history. We're like the only continent which didn't develop archery. Every other continent, Americas, Africa, Europe, Asia, they had archery, but the Aboriginal people of Australia did not utilize archery. So the archery history that we have, the heritage we have, is inherited from European colonization. So I don't get a lot of exposure to archery. So it's a bit different from me. I kind of grew up in a different archery environment. Okay, what else are we looking at here? More questions from here. Jimmy, during expansion, in order to pull through the clicker, can you explain which muscle group is involved and what these muscles are supposed to do? I could squeeze my back muscle together and or rotate my draw elbow back, but I don't quite understand how this is supposed to translate to an increase in my draw length. So I could pull through the clicker. It's more of a pull motion with my other arm or push motion with my draw arm or bow arm. So the how do you expand? The expansion is both a push and a pull. Some people actually throw it off balance. You need to engage both your back muscles on both sides equally. So when you squeeze together, you get a full draw. It's not a pull. It's not a push. It's actually both. The key here is that you anchor and you hold your anchor in the same place. We say expansion because your chest will feel like it's expanding. You're engaging your back muscles here. I don't have any video to show you right now, but if you watch demonstrations of back tension, you see the shoulders basically come together. Your shoulder blades move close together. These shoulder blades, they'll move closer in. That's really what you're trying to replicate in your back. It's your shoulder blades pressing together. In doing so, the muscles in your chest expand. That's what we call an expansion. Because your back muscles will contract and come together, your chest expands. That's basically the movement you want. Like this is the gross motion. It's not the finesse version you see that professional shooters use. Then imagine starting here. And then you expand and you feel this movement, okay? That's what you want to do. It's not. I'm not pulling back with my hand. I'm not pushing forward with this arm. I'm keeping still. I'm feeling my back muscles come together. So that's kind of motion you want there. Okay, so it's hard to achieve when you're learning by yourself. So you have someone to watch you and guide you. It's even better. But yeah, it's a push and a pull. But make sure you keep your anchor still. So it's a question there. Oops, there we go. Sorry, just placing my thing back. Morton, won't that push the plunge into the arrow? Did I miss something? Did I mention something before? Was it the push pull you're talking about? Clarify. I wasn't paying attention in chat. Was that my last comment there? Oh, hey James, cool. Won't that push the plunger into the arrow? Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean that, Morton. So clarify for me in the comment. Next question. Let me switch over again. Hello, Chalasa. Thank you for joining us again. So next question comes from Arnold. Do you think being farsighted is going to affect my aim when shooting something like a 5mm? Blah, blah. I don't think being farsighted is going to be a huge problem shooting at a target. But if you're using a sight, that can be problematic if not wearing glasses of some sort. So I don't have a recommendation for a sight pin for far-sighted shooters. If you're not wearing corrective lenses, I can't really help you in this one specifically. It shouldn't affect your shooting, but if you actually in actuality, it might be a good thing because you're not meant to focus on your sight pin anyway. The sight pin is meant to be a blur. So, yeah, sorry, David. Yeah, it might be blocked in chat, so I'm not moderating chat right now, so it might be blocking there. That's fine. But feel free to like send it over and we'll talk about it later. Yeah. So when you line the sight up with the target, the sight isn't meant to be in focus anyway. So if you can barely see your sight, that's actually a good thing. So you might find it easier for someone who's just far-sighted than someone who's short-sighted like I am. But I don't think it will greatly affect your shooting. But I don't have experience of dealing with people who are far-sighted, so I'm interested what happens there. Hey, Kitson. But yeah, the for far-sighted, I don't think it's going to affect your shooting. You should be able to shoot just as fine as anybody else. But I'm not exactly sure what I would recommend for sight. Morton, sorry. If your arm moves to the left, it shouldn't push the arrow into the plunger. Like, you're not moving the arrow at all. The arrow's still on the bowstring, still holding in place. You're not. What are you doing that's pushing the arrow? Like, it's completely opposite, isn't it? Aren't you pulling away? If anything, but you're following a line. Like, you're not. The line isn't changing. You're not going like that and the whole bow's torqued. No, the bow's in place. You're anchoring here and you're pushing pull in a straight line. Like it might look like the shoulders are moving, but you're actually pushing straight. And that's really the key. A good shot is a straight shot. So as long as you follow the line of the arrow and the line of the shot, then there's no extra movement. If anything, it should release that, like flicks the arrow off, into the plunger or away from the plunger. But push pull doesn't push the arrow onto the plunger. If you do it correctly. Next question comes from Michael. Oh, okay. It's this sort of question, right? I think I've answered this question to Michael already in an email. But this is the thing, okay? Okay, look, I'll put it simple, guys. Stop looking at recommended length charts. These are so old. It's actually really frustrating to keep on getting the same question over and over again. This is why it's so many of the self-help guides for archery are just unhelpful. Things like recommended draw weights or recommended lengths, they generalize who you are and what you do. And the trap is, as beginners, you look up the easy charts and you don't figure out that this isn't meant for you. And like, nobody tells you this. It's actually really frustrating. And I had this question like 5 times from like the same person. Okay, so the problem is that I am 170 centimeters, and the chart tells me that I should be using a 68-inch bow. But I want to buy a Samick Sage or a Martin Jag, which is 64-inch or 62-inch. Can I use this bow? Yes, you can. The charts are not designed to look at beginner bows or field style bows or hunting bows. Those bows are generally smaller and they're fine. You can use them fine. There are some exceptions. Certain traditional bows, like actual primitive traditional bows, are only meant to be drawn to a certain length. So a max draw length is a problem. But for most recurve bows, there isn't a max draw length, and the effects of stacking won't be felt unless you like overdraw to like 32-inch or something. If you've got an exceptionally long draw, then it will stack humongously. Huge, whatever. It's a big stack. But look, I've got a club who is like really tall. He pulls like 30+ inches, and he shoots the Black Wolf fine. It stacks a lot. Actually, it's a good bow. It doesn't stack that much, but it's pulling much more on the fingers than it is on the right on the limbs. But you can actually ignore the charts. The charts are really meant for the long target bows, and it's meant to have the least amount of stack and the most optimal performance. It doesn't mean you can't use a shorter bow or a longer bow. So if, especially for shorter bows, if you're buying a bow that is designed for hunting, then the charts don't match what you are looking for. Ignore the charts. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I can use anything from a 54-inch bow to a 72-inch bow fine. I'm a pretty average guy. I'm probably ideally suited for a 66-inch bow. I shoot 68 for my competitive bow. I shoot 62 for my hunting bows. And my Mongolian horsebow is kind of like that small. Okay, so it's like you can shoot anything you want. So don't worry about charts. Okay, don't worry about the charts. Most charts aren't going to help you. I'll say this now as a general thing, because I've done quite a few annoyance videos where there are, if you weigh this much, you should use a. Actually, I had a guy ask me just like last week. He emailed me or something like that. I'm putting it somewhere in chat where, this chart says I should use a 45-pound bow. Bullcrap! You don't start with 45-pound bow. Like the bow you use isn't dependent on your weight. It's dependent on your experience, not your weight. And there are charts which say if you weigh this much, you must shoot a 45-pound. But no, 45-pound bow is like the top level for like most archers, let alone a beginner who weighs a lot. So it's absolutely stupid. So yeah, ignore charts, people. Like charts aren't helping you. Follow good advice. Don't follow charts. Okay. Kitten, sorry. I changed your X10 a few months ago with tungsten points. Found I could not release the shot as I kept thinking that would lose a 60. Yes, that's actually one reason why I don't use tungsten points. I'm not good enough to shoot with tungsten points. I'm not good enough to shoot with X10s, honestly. But I have X10s. I got the money, so I'll buy X10s. Try. Might as well shoot them. See how they work. And they work really well. But yeah, you need skill to match. And yes, you get a little paranoid about losing your good arrows. Yeah. I mean, the X10s themselves are expensive. Imagine using tungsten points. I mean, like if you get like the X10 tungsten aerojet points with James Park signature, the points cost as much as the shaft, and that's ridiculous. Yeah, that's terrible. Don't lose those points. Yeah. Good morning, Jennifer. I've answered your question, by the way, Jennifer. If you go back around 15 minutes, I've answered your question on your supposed traditional or compound bow bias. And that was, I think, depends on where you're from. Some places are more compound centric, others are more trad focused. I deal more with the internet, and the internet tends to be more trad biased. Whereas in real life, I have actually seen examples personally of like interdisciplinary friction. I mean, we're pretty open, small club, so like, and I'm there, and I shoot everything apart from compound. But apart from that, like, I don't really have an issue with people. But yeah, I've answered your question before. So thanks for joining me. Okay. All right. Next question. Still going through the Facebook ones here. I I don't know this answer. Guillermo, in Olympic recurve, why do we shoot 6 arrows per end and 6 ends per set, 12 per match? Where did numbers come from? I don't know the history of the 6 arrow end. I'm sure it has some kind of root in the 1900s where you have the ends where you shoot arrows at one end of the field and you go back to the other end and shoot reverse. I'm not sure why it's 6. If someone knows, just tell me in chat. 'Cause I actually don't know why it's 6. The rounds are there for a reason, but I've lost the history. I actually don't know what the history is. Alistair, if in freestyle recurve discipline you were allowed to use magnified lenses, peeps, and release aids, would recurve bow stand to be just as accurate as a compound bow? Beautiful question, by the way. So if recurve uses the same accessories as compound, would there be a difference in accuracy? Let me drink some more matcha, and then I'll give you an answer. The dozen theory might make sense actually. Half dozen, dozen. You should have a dozen of those. Yeah, it could work. I mean, like a lot of the Imperials work with 12s rather than a metric 10s, so that could be a reason why. I don't know why. Anyway, the question was, if you add a magnified lens, a release aid, and so on to a recurve bow, would it be as accurate? The answer, in my opinion, is no. There are a couple of reasons why compound will benefit more from these accessories. The big thing with compound is the fact that you hold a much lower draw weight. So you might be shooting a 45-pound compound bow, but you're holding like 15 or 20 pounds. It depends on the let off of the compound bow. But yeah, compound bows allow you to hold the bow in place with much less effort. This allows you to stabilize and take your time in taking the shot. With recurve, you kind of have a time limit. That's like one of the big problems. You can't hold on forever. Therefore, any benefit you gain from aligning a peep sight is lost because you are losing control of the shot with your muscles contracting. If you're shooting like a 45-pound bow, then like by the time you get to your full draw, you have to release in around 2 seconds for a clean shot before your muscles contract. Therefore, you can't screw around with a peep sight. That's why you don't see recurves have peep sights. There are more reasons apart from that, but a process reason is with a compound you can draw it. You can take your time to draw. You draw to the wall. You take your time anchoring. You get it exactly right, and that's one reason why compounds are so accurate. Is because you can align a peep sight with the front sight and therefore execute a straight shot. With recurve, not so much. You can't. You don't have the luxury of taking the time on the draw to position a peep sight. It doesn't work that way with recurve. Would a magnified lens help? Probably not. Magnified lenses are what we call a two-edged sword here, right? So it gives you an advantage by giving you a precise position to aim at. The disadvantage is that every movement you make is also magnified. That's a big problem, and that's why even like in compound rules you're allowed to use high power lenses, but most shooters don't use the highest possible power lens because that one dot you see, if you magnify it like 10 times, you go everywhere just by natural shake. Your hand will naturally shake. You can't remove all movement. That's why, again, like if you see if you see like snipers, like people who shoot rifles or snipers, they only shoot with the magnified the full power from a stable position, from like a stand or from a bipod or something. Because any movement is going to throw it off. You will notice it. And that's the same with a bow. If you magnify it, like remember the laser experiment. Like you can hold a laser on a spot, but the laser jumps around. Now magnify that like 20 times and you get the compound effect. So you actually don't necessarily want perfect precision. You can see the target as long as you align it correctly. You don't really need to get one. So a magnified lens doesn't really help that much. A lot of archers who shoot recurve shoot with an empty sight aperture with no dot at all. So all they see is a circle on a circle, and that's more effective than using a magnified lens. So yeah, a magnified lens might actually make things more difficult for a recurve shooter, because you don't need a pinpoint spot on the target. It's meant to float, and with experience, you can minimize the float and shoot the right timing. You're not gonna try. You're not trying to. You're not aligning a crosshair over a target to shoot perfectly. That's not how it works with recurve. And the other thing was the release rate. Can the release rate help? It does remove one potential source of problems. That is the finger release. That is the biggest impact. If one of the biggest sources of problems of recurve shooters is a finger release, because it's very hard to get a consistent release. So the release rate does mitigate that problem. However, again, with the recurve, you don't have the luxury of a let-off. A compound, because of the let-off, it gets easier as you pull it back further. Once you reach that let-off and you hit that wall, then you're basically sitting inside the bow holds itself, you hit the trigger and it releases. So you're allowed to do that. With a recurve, some hunters do use a release aid, and it does solve some problems, but because again you're under the time limit, you have that 2.5 second window where you do the shot and you release, you can't hold it, and that's kind of one of the reasons why you won't see people use release aids even in hunting where there's no rules from competition. So yeah, it should mitigate the problem of the finger release, but it doesn't guarantee accuracy either. Chris, a question there. You said once you level in WA hierarchy. I'm not sure. What was that? Huh. Once your level in WA hierarchy. Ask that question again, Chris. I'm not sure what you're asking me there. All right. Next question. We're getting through a lot of this. We're getting more and more questions, which is a good thing to have here. Paula, how do I choose a site? It's so confusing. Choose one which fits your bow. How do you choose a site? Sites, assume you should recurve, by the way. Sites are easy to pick from. All sites do the same thing. Understand that the cheap sites tend to be more fragile. The screws are not held in securely, so with constant shooting, there'll be vibrations, and it will loosen the screws for each shot. So with a $25 sight, you may have to tighten the screw every shot, literally. Like the screws come off all the time. The more expensive sights have much more secure locking mechanisms. So the high-end sights like the Shibuya sights or the Excel sights, those sights are going to stay solid for like the whole day. You won't ever have to touch them. That's really what it comes down to. If you're just learning, you don't spend much money on a sight. But if you know that you're going to shoot long term, spend good money on a good sight and you will never have to change it. That's really what it is. The better sights are more secure. They won't like drop off after a few shots, and you can reliably like micro adjust them. That's really what it is. So what was the question again, Chris? I'm not following chat at the same time here. What's this guy doing? Go away, shoot. So I've got a couple of windows open for OBS here, so I'm not seeing the chat window. I'm not looking at it as much. I've got the corner chat, so I mostly look at the corner chat. I do sometimes miss the actual chat from thing here. So what if you, by the way, if you ask, could you tag my name so I can see it on the chat window a bit better? So if you can re-ask the full question, I might understand that. Once I said in my hierarchy in WA instructor trainer levels. I think I know what you're asking me. So in coaching levels, you have like from level 1, 2, 3, and so on. I'm not accredited by WA. I'm accredited by AA, so Archery Australia. So I'm a level 1 Archery Australia. instructor. So the way we have in Australia, we have formally we have 1, 2, 3, I think, or 4. So the way it works is there's a 0, which is optional. So our level 0 AA is a community instructor. So people who run camps and school programs have the option of taking a program, a course for basic archery skills. That's level 0. Level 1 is the instructor level, which is come and try. That's accreditation to run the introductory beginner program for beginners. Level 2 is coach. I'm level 1. I think now I'm eligible for level 2 to be a coach, so I might be getting that sometime soon. And level 3 and 4 is like regional coach and high performance coach, which is like much higher up, which is not my thing here. In other systems, it's kind of very similar. I think America has the same thing. So you have level 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there's a 5 as well for the NTAS system. Or NTAS. And World Archery has their own accreditation, like level 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And I think basically all the level 2s line up. Level 2 is coach level. Level 2 means that you have like the understandings of recurve tuning, compound, bare bone, and so on. So you have enough knowledge of the science and equipment to teach people that. I'm not sure what the question actually was, Chris, but yeah, you're giving me statements, not questions. So I'm not sure what the question is. But yeah, I'm a level 1 instructor, which is not like a coach level. It's instructor level. Next question. I think I'll do Robert. Why does archery melt my brain with frustration? It's mostly because there are so many things that can go wrong with your technique that it's hard to diagnose. The more you think about what you're doing wrong, the more you get it wrong. So yeah, it's like, I mean, people who do archery are people who think. When we think of archers, when we watch people, like if you're not an archer and you watch someone do archery, you think, oh, they're hitting bullseyes. But in our mind, we're going through a checklist, step by step, a process, and like we start from like 1 or 2 steps, and it expands to like 10 steps, and then every step is like 5 mini steps. Yeah, sorry. You have like all these smaller steps. And it's so sensitive where you pick up certain things, you forget others, and that's the frustrating part. It's why, like, people get like really like mental frustration, because you should be doing really well, but you keep on screwing this one thing up. It's very sensitive. So that's, I mean, it's a broad question. I mean, it's probably a rage question, but yeah, no, you're not alone. Like, people will get frustrated by archery because it's not as easy as it looks. There are so many things which mentally we get wrong, and we know we should get right, but we get wrong, and that's frustrating. Sorry, back to Chris. It's basically a level 1 and 2 WA. Yeah. I'm a level 1, I think, officially. I mean, I think the AA level 1 matches with WA level 1. It's just beginner level. I had the level 2 stuff here, but I'm not accredited for level 2. I mean, you can get WA accreditation. I don't need it. I've got to travel to, Switzerland to get WA, which I'm not going to do. But I think our level 2 lines up with WA anyway. Cool. All right. Question from Morton. Here we go. So, how do we determine an idiosyncrasy from a form or technique fault, making it excusable? This is the classic thing about like anything can work in archery. So, the thing with the general idea of anything works doesn't mean you can do anything and therefore it is good. The reason why we have a standard form is we prove through sports science and through the experience, the collective experience of coaching and coaching programs, that certain processes work better than others. Now, some people cannot do the same processes, and that is why you have idiosyncrasies, because some people have to get things right a certain way. Now, as a coach, you have to determine whether this technique is causing more harm than good, whether this movement is necessary in the first place. If the archer can attain the same precision, accuracy, and consistency with this method, do they need to follow this other method? A couple of key examples here. Let's think about firstly Jean-Claude Valadont, from the French Olympic shooter. Now, he draws very low. He points a bow quite high and he anchors. That's what you might consider to be an idiosyncrasy. In most archery coaching, that is a form fault and barely legal in competition. The reason why he does that is because of a shoulder injury. He has to shoot that way because he can't actually pull it correctly. Now he's modified his technique so that it's legal. So he's not actually drawing a sky drawing, it's actually a bit more in line. But he knows it and he's worked with his coach to develop technique which works. Another example is Michele Frangilli from Italy, who does a more prominent push motion rather than a pull motion. Again, because of injury. So people will often work around their, firstly, their physical limitations, and also preference. There's one is something where you don't have a preference, where you have to do things a certain way. That makes sense. Then there are preferential things. And with the physical limitations, you don't have a choice in this. You have to follow what the archer can and can't do. But for preferences, again, it depends on how effective this is. If a person's particular style or technique works, then as a coach, I'm inclined to go, okay, keep on doing it. But I'm also going to be watching skeptically. And I'm going to be thinking, is this person really going to do this all the time and do consistently? Because what will work well for them might work only once on certain days. All right. The ultimate goal is to create, I want to say, a shooting machine, but that's really what it is, right? Like accurate shooting means your body has to follow a process as closely as possible to what a machine would do. The more consistent you are, then the better you are. The more accurate you'll be, the more precise you'll be. And if there are extraneous movements which don't help this, then the coach would probably identify the things that can be removed. For example, one thing I used to do, was I used to draw quite low to my chest, then anchor up here. Because I personally found it easier to go down here than up here. My coach hated that. He pushed me out of it. For good reason, because he considered this to be wasted movement. I felt it wasn't, because I felt like I could get my back tension right here and then anchor correctly. I see quite a few archers draw quite low and then anchor up here. And I think this is where I disagree with my coach. Now, was he wrong? No, I think he was absolutely right. Was I wrong? No, I think I was right too. And that's the thing. I think that's my answer to Morton's question. When it comes to personal preferences and idiosyncrasies, I don't think anyone's wrong. I think everyone can be right, but it's why you do so that matters. A coach should work closely with the archer to figure out what is the best approach, what is the best method for the archer, not the coach, the best method for the archer. I think this is a shortcoming in many coaches, especially people who visit and give you advice, or people who give you unsolicited advice. This is what really hurts archers sometimes, is people will come and say you're doing it wrong, but they don't understand why you're doing it. And I think the fundamental of a coach is that instead of saying you're doing it wrong, they should be asking, why are you doing this? Right? And this is what I've learned in my technique, in my experience as an instructor and a coach, is whenever I see someone shoot, I would ask why they're doing this. And the point is to start a conversation where we can both learn from this. The archer can learn from my experience, and I can learn from their experience. I might find this technique works better for certain people than others. So you don't teach one uniform way. You teach a baseline, a benchmark, so that everyone has the same foundation. But as with all things, once you have the foundation, people will start going their own way. They'll start experimenting and exploring, and therefore they'll acquire a process and a technique which works well for them. And for that reason, you shouldn't necessarily copy somebody else, because what they do won't necessarily work for you. An example of this is we were getting coaching from our state coaching director. And it was funny because like I wasn't planning on getting coaching. I was doing my own thing anyway, but I ended up being like the model. So basically, do what he does. So things like back tension, basically watch this guy shoot like him, and I exhibited a particular technique which others didn't do in my club. So there were like five of us, and most of us are like the intermediate level. We have our own bows, been shooting for quite a while, but making no progress. I was like the exception because I do shoot competitively rather than the others, so I have a bit more experience in that background. And I do certain because I spent more time shooting and training, developed my technique. I've developed certain habits, or as Walter might say, idiosyncrasies, which work for me that remind me to do it right. And I've mentioned before in previous reflection videos and live streams that one thing I'm doing more now is having a half draw. So I would draw part way, and I'll probably touch here, for example. I'll probably go here, back tension on, and then in, and then pow. That's my process now. So rather than try and get it right here, I'll get it right here, and then anchor, and then shoot. That's my exaggerated movement. You see the process there. Now, for the others, because they haven't been coached in this technique, something I kind of watched, for example, Chang Hae-jin, the Korean world champion, she does a similar thing. And I didn't copy her, but I understood why she was doing it, and I felt that it would benefit me. So that was my personal approach to my shot process to make it more consistent. And the state coach picked it up. And she didn't say, do what David's doing. Don't do what he's doing, but look at why he's doing it. And she explained why I did it. I didn't have to explain why I did it. She knew why I did it. And I also explained, but she and I knew from our coaching experience that a lot of top shooters would do this technique. Now, my personal twist was I actually draw a lot further back. So a lot of the pro shooters would draw like kind of around here, a line, and then get into one motion. Whereas I tend to draw much more closer, like with my thumb here or my finger here, and then drop in. So I had a much longer part draw. But she explained it so well. It's like she trained me to do this, but she didn't train me for this. I came up with it myself. Aside, like away from my own coach, it's my own technique. But she explained it to the point, and that was, she explained my back tension, my process, and why I did this to get it right. And other people started trying it out, and some people would copy it, other people wouldn't use it. Didn't really matter too much. The point being is that instead of shutting me down and saying, no, you have to do it this way, she recognized why I did it that way. And she of course she's experienced enough to know top shooters do this and I do this, and there are similarities here, and she could properly use it as a way to educate others, not to force it on others, not to force it away from certain people, but to show people what others do, and whether or not it works for you is something you choose. That was made very clear in that coaching session. And that, I think, is the answer to that question from Morton was, at what point is there a form fault and an idiosyncrasy? As a coach, a form fault is when something clearly is wrong and doesn't work. There are certain things which, as an archer, should not be efficient, should not be effective. For example, if you have a raised shoulder and you shoot like this, you can still shoot well, but we consider it a form fault because it is a misalignment, it is inefficient and cause injury. That's why we call it a form fault. But if you want to shoot with a left-handed bow, inverted grip like Gumiku Jonsson from Iceland, then that could work as well. It generally isn't very popular, and we tend to push people away from it because it's not effective and most people can't pull it off. But it can be done. So the key is to ask why. Always ask why people do things and open a conversation instead of judging people and saying they're wrong. Because people will always be defensive. Say, oh, it works for me, I don't want to listen to you. Yeah, it happens a lot. So I tread a very thin line here, right? Some people I will sense they don't want my help, so I'm not going to push my advice to them. But people who are open to learning will normally ask and kind of question, and they'll ask for advice. And the more open you are, then the easier it is to communicate and share our experience. Whereas people will have a set mentality, have a hard time being open minded to other things, and it's very hard to coach someone who doesn't really want to learn. So that's my general thing. Sorry, David's a good point there. Talk about dogs here, right? Yeah, even with David being disabled or people not if it works, if it's safe, service dog instructor, I'm obligated to work. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a very good point there. People will work in different ways, but there are certain things we have to tell people to do correctly. I mean, as long as what you do is safe, then I have no role in judging you for what you're doing, as long as it works and it's safe. That's really what it is. Okay. Oh, sorry, there's a question from Kevin there. That's what I'm thinking about not going further coaching levels. Yes, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Coaching is very standardized, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because, like, again, you as with a coach or instructor teaching new learners, the system will teach new coaches a baseline, a benchmark, and like every system has a different set of rules and processes. So like I know, for example, Archery Australia don't teach open stance. Strange, right? So I teach open stance. They teach square stance. So does Korea, by the way. Okay, so like things like square stance, open stance depends on what doctrine you follow. Okay, now. And of course, like in Australia, we actually reject basically KSL. In America, it's all KSL. Like the NTAS system or the BEST system is a KSL. KSL is an optional thing around the world. In Australia, ironically, despite basically having built a lot of the archery program in Australia, we actually don't include KSL in our official program. We teach the AA program, so it's a hash of many different things. And my own coach was involved in doing this too, so he was very good at teaching me this. But yeah, KSL is not a part of our program. Now, coaches can choose to be trained and accredited in KSL method. And that is a very good method for many archers. I mean, it works, right? It works for America. It should work elsewhere, but it disagrees with like what AA does. So AA will teach one thing, and KSL will teach another. And AA does not reject KSL, but it doesn't recognize KSL as part of their accreditation. So people who choose to do like a level 2 KSL don't automatically have a level 2 AA. That sort of thing. Like certain private coaches will advertise themselves as having both AA and KSL accreditation, and like the more you know, the better it is. And I think this is the line that I think Kevin's going to talk about here too. It's as a coach, you're trained in a certain method. That is true, but a good coach will recognize what works and what doesn't on an individual case by case basis. A good coach will recognize what they need to do to make it work. That means sometimes you bend rules and you break rules. That's what good coaches do. They teach people based on what they learn. Same as a teacher here, bro. Now, I have to teach certain curriculum. I have to follow certain things I have to teach. But the way I teach it doesn't have to be the same as every single person. And you recognize different ways to do things better or differently. So that's a sign of a good coach and a good teacher. So I want to get my coaching certification because I want to know more. I don't want to reject things and say, this is useless. I want to know enough. But through time and experience, you can apply things differently and understand what works best for one person in one situation. Okay. Am I looking at international tournaments? No, not at the moment. I'm barely managing my club level, Trillilla International. I have no ambition until I know I'm good enough. All right. Man, we haven't touched the YouTube questions yet. We'll rush through the rest of the Facebook ones. Matches, what is considered good comparative distance to shoot when it comes to flat bows? Flat bows and long bows, for traditional shooting, probably 50 meters, 60 at most. I think that probably, like, you're thinking of 3D or field archery, where that's more common. And most targets in 3D are like under 30 meters. So if you're shooting at 3D targets, probably 30 to 40 meters at most. If you're shooting normal outdoor target, then probably no more than 50 meters for a flat bow. Do you, Jackson, do you pay attention to brace height when choosing a bow? No, you don't. And Paula, nanos versus X10s. I can't compare this scientifically. X10s are the market dominant arrow. The carbon expressed nano maxes should be, so the nanos should be also very good, but I don't have any data to support that hypothesis. Onto the YouTube questions. Okay, this has been an hour and a half, hasn't it, right? No, nearly there. It's been a good live stream, guys. Great questions and hopefully good answers as well. I'll talk through the rest of the things a bit later. So, the questions here. I'll do a quick refresh. People are commenting, so I'll do a quick refresh. There's the Lars Anderson cameo. Hey, there's Lars Anderson. All right. Okay, no extra questions, so we'll go through these. These are quite good as well. And a quick tea break here. Cold tea, great. So it's kind of lukewarm, which is the worst. Okay, so Ron J. Jimenez. How long or how many times did you visit your local archery club and did the come and try sessions before finally deciding to buy your first bow package? It took me around 8 weeks or 8 sessions, about 2 to 3 months. I took my time. I think like after 4 weeks, most people would decide. In our current program, I think we have a 12 session cap before you have to become a member. So I think 12 sessions is probably the maximum. I took my time for 8, so about 8 sessions, about 8 weeks or 2 months. I took my time in learning and choosing the bow I wanted. So yeah, about 8 weeks. Most people do it sooner, but I took my time in choosing the right bow, and it wasn't the right bow anyway. it was. I bought a bow which I would learn from, and I learned what each thing did. So I acquired a good knowledge of buying equipment through buying equipment, yeah, I didn't mind. It was I wasn't sure how much I was going to spend, so I spent a low amount, and I eventually upgraded and replaced everything. But it was a good learning experience, and of course I eventually sold or gave away my other gear. So it was a good learning experience all around. But 8 weeks for that question. I'll do the Warzone stuff different time. Savonia, for a newcomer to the field of archery, what would be a safe environment to set up in? I have everything I need to practice archery except an actually able to shoot arrows. So any advice to what regarding for safe practice environment? Okay, so for a safe environment for archery, the main thing to watch out for is firstly make sure it's legal in your area. That if you have laws for your property or for your area, then do consider what the laws are first. In terms of making your area safe, the main thing, well, there are 2 things to really think about. One is to contain the area. So arrows do not leave the field or the area you shoot in. If you're shooting an indoor range, for example, make sure arrows don't go through the wall. Make sure there's 0% chance of arrows passing outside of the field or whatever you're doing, whether it's your backyard or whether it's the indoor range or your living room, whatever. Make sure there is 0 chance that any arrow can leave that field. Even for an archery club, we have to ensure a 0% chance. And we look at my club, for example, we're fighting tooth and nail to prove the 0% chance. Our council still thinks we're a dangerous sport, even though there is a 0 incident rate. So it's a pain in the bum to prove. Like, they have no evidence to say that we're dangerous, but we have to prove a negative somehow. So it's weird. So yeah, make sure you have a 0% chance of any arrow possibly leaving your range. That means backstops for indoor shooting, or an overshoot distance or barrier for outdoor shooting. That's one thing. The second thing to note is to restrict access to the field. So make sure people can't get into the field or whatever area you use to shoot in. So the 2 things are, make sure you restrict access so people can't walk into the field when you're using it, and contain the field so arrows don't leave the field. So people don't go in, arrows don't go out. That's kidding. Sorry, Ahmed. I'm not gonna stream War Thunder. I'm not interested. I don't think people want to watch that. So, who wants to watch an arcade player stream War Thunder? Really, no fun there. Okay. Low quality internet warrior. How stressful is it to get to your level of archery? Well, considering my level was pretty low, not very stressful at all. Seriously. Like I'm like the average archer. Right? I'm not a pro archer. I'm not a top level archer. I'm pretty average. To get to my level, isn't that hard? Train once a week, you get to my level. I mean, where I'm standing, objectively speaking, like we have a rating called Grandmaster, which is like it's not actually the highest ranking. It's kind of like the black belt of archery. Okay, so let's say a Grandmaster bowman in our rating system is the black belt. A black belt, by the way, doesn't show that you're a master. It shows you've learned all the basics and you have competency. So in most martial arts systems, a black belt means you've learned enough to become like a competent practitioner of the art. There are higher grades above black belt. In the Australian system of archery, we have the Grandmaster rating. We go from white, black, blue, red, gold, and then we have Master and Grandmaster. And then we recently implemented Elite Bronze, Elite Silver, Elite Gold. They show the really, really top stuff. It's kind of like you have like first dan, second dan, third dan for like karate or taekwondo and so on. So you have different grades above that. So a Grandmaster is basically what we aspire to be to get a ranking. I'm probably at the moment averaging a blue rating. So I'm like a blue belt compared to a black belt. So yeah, it's not that hard to get to. And I think from the stats, I'm like 62% of the way to a Grandmaster. So I'm pretty average. Frankly, I'm pretty average. It's not hard to get to my level. As long as you are consistently practicing and you're being coached and you improve, then yeah, you should be okay. I probably could be more advanced sooner, but my pathway in archery has been quite different. I spent 4 years being club president, so a lot of my time was spent away from practicing. Had very big gaps, had a club suspension and shut down. So I've had a very interrupted pathway. If I started and maintained the same level of progress all the way through, I'd probably be much better now. But my pathway has been unusual. So I still consider myself to be an average archer, not a top level archer, not a pro archer or a high skilled archer. I'm very much an average archer, and many people would probably agree. I mean, if you look at my stats and my performance, I'm pretty average, and I kind of float around the average level. So yeah, it's not hard to get to my level, but if you want to get above that, then you need to be a lot more consistent than what I am right now. Hello, welcome to the stream. Okay, Mark. For someone attempting to get into Olympic archery, what is the best first bow package to buy for home? I've been renting a naked Olympic bow. Ooh, a naked Olympic bow at my archery club recently. I'm gonna save money to buy your own. Okay, I don't have a recommendation for a best beginner bow for Olympic style. Like you want a budget, let's say around $600. That's very flexible, by the way. Like you can get a lot of things for $600. Now, you don't need to buy top gear. You want to buy something decent that you want to use that's really good. So I would recommend like you go for brand names. For example, SF Sebastian Flute, or what's now called WNS. Some Hoyt bows can be quite cheap as well. And there are several others in the low mid price range. So yeah, like anything, if a riser costs around $300, that's good enough for intermediate to like low top level shooting. You're completely fine with that. Limbs, go cheap unless you're like you don't have to buy really good limbs because you'll be changing them quite frequently. So buy fairly inexpensive limbs, $120 for limbs are fine. And the accessories depends on your budget. I would recommend a very good sight and a very good plunger that will last you forever. Buy a cheap rest. Buy relatively affordable arrows. So I don't have a kit in mind, but just like anything that you can get within that price range is good enough to start with for Olympic style archery. Ooh, let's go. Next one. Jason, could I theoretically just use a pillow with a target taped on its target if I'm just backyard shooting? Jason, the answer is no. You should not use a pillow as a target. Couple of reasons why. Understand firstly how targets work. This might be a silly question, but understand how a target actually works. Duh, the target stops the arrow. The main reason the target stops the arrow is from friction. Okay, there are two ways. You either stop it by brute force, so shooting through like a wooden plank. Yes, it'll stop it through a bonk, and it'll break the arrow. But for soft targets like foam or plastic, it's stopped through friction. So the material you use has to be dense enough so that the arrow will be stopped by friction. A pillow is not dense. A pillow is perhaps the worst possible kind of target to shoot at because, one, the material is very light, airy, fluffy. Okay, so your arrows will go right through it. There's not enough material to stop the arrow from going through. Cushions and pillows are a bad, bad choice. The second reason is the material in the pillow is inconsistent. You will find, of course, that the feather material, the down in the pillow, will drop, will move around. Especially as you start hitting holes in the pillow, the fluff will come out, and that means that the material will drop to the bottom of the pillow, and the middle and top parts will be very thin. So your arrows will be shooting through nothing but pillow covers. So terrible choice. Yep, terrible, terrible choice. All right. Sorry, we're looking at things here. Libertine, have you ever thought of shooting some of the things? No, like, shoot people, absolutely not. We don't shoot people in archery. It's a sport. I'm very hardline with shooting at people. I mean, archery tag is different. It's a game. We can play that, right? But as an archer, you never talk about shooting people. It's a taboo subject, right? Even hunting, you don't shoot people. I had an incident with a visitor at the club last week, where he's this older guy. He's a bit loopy in the head, and he just turned up and started talking about how when he was 13 years old, he'd got a bow and shooting at his friend, and they were dodging arrows. And of course, when you're telling a good yarn, you're telling a good anecdote. But oh yeah, I was like 13. I was like shooting my friend. He was dodging the arrow and shooting me back. And like he's having such a good time recollecting his childhood memories. And for most people, you would laugh along and say, "Oh, that's such a good story." I was deadpan, sitting here, glaring him, and I said, "We don't share those stories here." Now that's perhaps that's what I would call an asshole move. Like, I was being an asshole. That's true. Okay, I was in a bad mood anyway, but he was just bragging about shooting his friend, and I, as a former club president and an instructor, I cannot condone that. I cannot endorse that. I cannot say that that's a good thing. So I'm being an asshole and I'm saying, don't talk about it. Okay, whatever experience you have in shooting at people, do not share it here. Because if you talk about shooting at people, you are kicked out. You are persona non grata. Okay, you are not welcome at the club if you have a history of shooting at people, even for fun as a kid. Because we don't tolerate that here. That is an absolute no. We have a reputation to protect. Archery is a safe sport. It is the safest or second safest sport. Because people don't get hurt in archery. You don't shoot at each other. That is a taboo subject. You want to trigger people, then you just mention shooting people. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Sorry, there's a question up here. That was Libertine's question. Where was I? DJKR has something there. So you went to archery for the first time. You were giving a 26-pound draw weight and fiberglass arrows. Fiberglass arrows are okay. I mean, this is a pretty cheap option. They can work fine. In fact, they might be desirable for some clubs because they're very low priced. 26-pound draw weight is a little bit heavy for beginners, but it's not a bad mismatch. I think I've seen worse. I'm not sure what the question is. Improving more, DJ, depends on what you're being taught. Um, you can't you can't improve unless you know what you're doing wrong. That means you need someone to teach you and guide you. So I can't give you any advice on what to improve without seeing you shoot. For the first timers, it's mostly follow process, have fun, don't worry about hitting the targets. That is the bonus. But as you do more and more shooting, you will want to acquire more specific knowledge. And where possible, ask the instructors. Actually, ask them. A lot of us, because we have to teach many people, we don't get the chance to teach people one on one. I mean, like, ideally, the ratio might be like one instructor for every three learners. That's a luxury. Most places can't have that. So it's like one instructor for like 20 people or something. So our time is very limited. And most people actually don't want to learn, they want to shoot. They just want to have fun. So if you're the sort of person who wants to learn a lot from archery, you need to make it known. You need to vocalize what you want. So, like, ideally, I'm saying this from my point of view as an instructor, for example, that I like to show people things, but I tend to be a bit more passive. All right, so people just want to have fun. I'll let them have fun. But people who have that little twinkle in the eye, they're kind of trying to figure things out. I'll probably step back and say, oh, no, do you want some advice? I'll ask them, do you want to learn something new? So the more people ask me, the more I will share with them. If you don't want to learn, then I'm going to leave you to have fun. That's kind of my approach to being an instructor. I have so many people to teach. I can't spend half an hour with every single person showing them every single step. So I teach as we go along. If someone's doing something really wrong, then I'll show them the right way. If someone's struggling, I'll guide them in the right direction. For people who want pro tips, they need to ask for it. All right. That way we know that you have an extra interest, and you need to be, satisfied with a bit more like pro knowledge, which is completely fine. So my advice, TJ, is if you want to become better, ask the instructor. Actually, make a point to ask the instructor. If you don't ask, you don't receive. That's my advice. I don't think the problem is the arrows, Morton, by the way. It might be. I mean, I don't know what they're shooting. But fiberglass should work fine from a 26-pound bow. Depends what the arrow spine is. We don't know what the arrow spine is. We don't know what the problem is. And there is no problem as far as we know. It might be that it's just learning and it hasn't hit the target yet. So don't judge. Don't be too quick to judge. Remember what I said before, right, Morton? Don't judge. Ask. Ask before you judge. Okay. Next question. Jeremy. Oh, sorry. Jeremy's a good question here. Why don't you form check stream in the morning once so the rest of the Americans and I can watch it without getting up at midnight? Good question. Why don't I stream in the mornings? Because I work full time. So I can't stream in the mornings. And when it comes to the weekend, I'm either volunteering at my club or I'm actually shooting a round or a tournament. So I can't do mornings. Mornings are very exceptional. Now, during school holidays or time off, then I might do the mornings. But come on, I'm a school teacher. Like, what school teacher wakes up in the morning on a day off, right? So I do try to spread out my streams, but this is kind of like the ideal time for me. It's evening. I do late streams like 11 p.m. here or 10 p.m. I start this one at 8:30. It's a bit earlier than usual, but it depends on my schedule. I can't fit in because I work full time. That's the thing, right? Like, this isn't my job. I don't get paid for my archery volunteering stuff. I get paid through YouTube, of course, but like, archery is not a job for me, and it shouldn't be. I don't want to make it a job. Therefore, I make a point to stream when I can, and if you can't join me, unfortunately, I can't really cater for that. I try, but not always. Okay. Next question. Eugene, I got my right shoulder dislocated a year ago. Will affect me doing archery? Yes, it can. These things depend on how much damage. I said before to a different question, how much damage you incurred in your injury and how much you've recovered and rehabilitated. A big point is firstly the strength and conditioning of your shoulder. The second is your range of motion. So this will depend on the extent. People will often do archery to recover and rehabilitate. So it doesn't stop you from doing archery, but you need to know your limits as well. Peter, is it bad, I guess, if you leave your wire rest static? You got a free front on stage and it tears the bottom vein. It should flip. Static isn't bad, but flipping isn't bad either. It's meant to flip. Now, the thing to note with the rest is that the vein should not come in contact with the rest. If you see marks on the rest, or the vein is being ripped up by the rest, there's a problem with the arrow tune. It may be your arrow is too stiff or too soft, because I don't have an arrow here right now, funny enough. The arrow, let's use a point, a ruler. Bingo. All right. Imagine this is an arrow. Just work with me here, right? Imagine this arrow here. It flexes, okay? Now, if you're shooting from a rest, when the arrow is released, by the time it passes, the vein passes the rest, it should be flexing around the rest. There shouldn't be any contact with the riser or the rest. It actually flexes around it. If there is contact, and this tends to happen with a slightly stiff arrow, is that the back of the arrow may touch and come in contact with the rest or the plunger. In that case, the problem isn't caused by your rest. The problem is caused by your arrow tune. So you might want to do a tune for your arrow so that you ensure there's no contact. Fixing the rest or making it flip or making it static doesn't necessarily solve that problem. So that's what I would recommend, is check your tune for that one. Frank, when shooting my arrows, it seems that they get a little jump upon release. Testing the vein clearance, that seems okay. The arrow is perfect 90 degrees to the string. Could it be... Now, another problem, by the way. If the arrow is jumping up on release and the arrow is perfect 90 degrees, this is the actual cause of the problem. You actually don't want the arrow to be perfectly perpendicular. You want the arrow to be pointing slightly down, so above the square. When you get to full draw, you actually normalize the draw, okay? Because the angle of the string, the way you pull the string back, you don't actually want the arrow to be perfectly 90 degrees. It should be like above by about 3 degrees or something, or like 1 or 2 degrees slightly above. So try that. Try moving the knock point upwards so the arrow is pointing slightly downwards. That's normally considered to be the correct alignment. If it's perfectly 90 degrees, that's actually going to cause the arrow to flick upwards because it's more contact with the rest, whatever you're using. I'm not sure if we're using a stick-on rest or off the shelf, but it will flick upwards if you put it at 90 degrees. That's probably the cause of the problem. Back to Peter. If you unstring your endless loop bowstring and put the small loop to the bigger loop, then loop it back around. Yeah, right. Whatever. That's a nice one, actually. Well done, Peter. Rolf, I got a problem with my string hand rotating out of alignment. My knuckles form 90. Oh, I know this problem. I can't untwist it and take a relaxed stance. It rotates in string. I sketch my fingers, start with pinky. Okay. All right. This is the problem. All right. So the problem Rolf describes is he can only shoot like this, basically. So you pull the string back. You have to angle this way. If you angle it back, you release. Okay, firstly, it's actually okay to have a slight turn. Like biomechanically, you can't actually hold the hand perfectly straight like this. Everyone has some kind of angle. So don't try too hard to turn perfectly straight. You can't. So it's normal to have something here. So yeah, think about the way my solution for you is to look at the hook, okay? If you have all the fingers on the first joint on the string and you're trying to do that, that's really hard to do. Think about spreading the load across your fingers more diagonally. So think about doing it like, instead of doing this and being perfectly straight, think about what the Olympic archers do. We have first joint, and then maybe pad. So think about spreading your fingers out a bit more on your release. So that way you can actually get a more natural alignment. But if you're involuntary releasing, that's actually a problem you have to think about. You have to be more conscious of this. If you have a subconscious release that's flawed, you need to think about it more and then make that new method subconscious. I think there's a question there before. No, that's not important. Let's get back to our Shingo here. Am I a teacher? Yes, I am. I already said that. And Archery Christian from Sashin. I was red to my elbow consciously. Shinrika, I've still got really nasty bow slap. Look, I've covered this in my video, as you said before here. Your elbow is slightly double jointed. It tends to be a problem. Oh. Oh. Okay. Oh, that's not good. Okay. You don't want to stick your chest out a bit. I'm not sure about this one here. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what that means. I mean, it's actually pretty decent form to do that, actually, but it doesn't stop you getting string slapped. If there's any one extra tip, if you haven't seen it already, it's open your stance. Double jointed tends to be quite hard to work with because you have a very kind of distinct elbow. Rotate. You might want to bend your arm just a bit just to make it work a little better. And then you might want to open your stance. Three things is kind of make sure you rotate, slight bend if it helps, especially for double jointed people. And the last thing would be to open your stance. Otherwise, yeah, just like you shouldn't be hitting yourself if you do it correctly. But of course, if you're bruising, then you're doing it wrong. There are many causes. My video covers basically all of them, but it depends on where you're being hit. If you're being hit in your forearm, that part there, then that's most likely a stance position. So just be careful of that. So yeah, unless I see you shoot, I have no advice specifically. And that finally ends our prepared questions. We'll be quite happy to take live questions for the next, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes. And that will end our June Q&A. So, I will finish the rest of my lukewarm matcha. And as you're doing that, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we will go for the last 15 or so minutes. Is there any medieval archery reenactment? Yes. You find them a lot more in like Europe because that's where like the origins are. In Australia, not so much because we don't have an archery history. Some people do like LARPing, which is not reenactment, but yes, there is archery reenactment. That is a thing. I mean, if you can find it in your area, good luck with that. But I don't think we have any in our area. But yes, reenactment is a real thing. Advice on aligning string and sight, Warwick. Advice. You shouldn't have to close your left eye. Ideally should both eyes open. Ideally, you should be using both eyes. Advice. Jeez. I guess initially, focus on where the string is in relation to your sight. Now, over time, this will be natural, and you don't focus on the sight and the string. But when you're starting out, you may want to take your focus away from the target and actually pay more attention to where the string is in relation to the sight. So try to I mean, this is kind of why I like the rotational draw, because it allows me to bring the string across to the side. So perhaps in some ways exaggerate the movement of the string. So actually see where the string is and align, like actually it's like kind of this, the whole parallax effect where you see the string and the sight kind of come together there. Once you recognize this alignment, you should be able to get this a bit more naturally with both eyes. It takes time to train your brain to recognize this with both eyes. But once you see this movement coming in, then that's a sweet spot. It's kind of like those video games where you time things. Like you go beep, 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 bing, and then you shoot, right? So that's kind of what you want to do, is kind of have this sequence where you have more of a run up. You have more time to go, that is right, the target locked on, and shoot. So think of it that way. Think of it as locking on, okay? When you start off and you don't recognize good alignment, you need to have more space to work with. Therefore, instead of trying to be too fine here, start from start wider in your alignment, and then come in closer and get used to that. That's my advice. A little tough there, but yeah, that's probably where I'd probably advise you of that. How cold is it down here? Probably not that cold. I mean, in daytime it's been like in this week's been like 13 to 15 degrees maximum, which is pretty decent for winter. Nighttime's like 5 degrees and under, so it's not that cold. Let's see. Archery injuries. Mainly the shoulders. The thing that people screw up, as the others are saying, it's rotator cuff. Easy to get injured and hard to recover from. Yeah, absolutely. The thing which people screw up in archery. I mean, archery injuries are rare if you do it correctly. If you do it incorrectly, or you do something stupid, like use a very high bow, very high draw weight for your bow, this is effed up bad, and you see it so often. And this one too, if you're drawing this way, people who do it incorrectly will use their shoulders to draw all the way, and there's a lot of weight on their shoulder. That's very bad. But the other thing is when the shoulder comes up, and this tends to happen more with higher draw weights, because you're using your brain's telling you to use your body to get into the weight, but you're actually pushing your body out of alignment, which is making it worse. So yeah, the main problem is shoulder injuries in archery. It's mostly the rotator cuff, because you're putting pressure on a very sensitive part of your shoulder, and if you destroy this, your archery career is basically gone, as well as a lot of your daily life. It's not dangerous, but you've got to learn the right technique with a proper light bow. You do not start with a heavy bow, because you're far more likely to injure this, and your shoulders aren't just for archery, it's for your daily life. So be mindful of the shoulders. If it feels wrong in your shoulders, you are doing it wrong. Okay, this is the first line of injury. If it looks wrong and it feels wrong, it is wrong. Good form and proper technique does not feel wrong. It feels right. It seems like vague advice, but your body will know when it feels right. You might not recognize when you're doing it wrong, but you should. If it hurts, you're doing it wrong. You should not be feeling pain in archery. And the thing with these shoulder muscles is that you can push them a lot, and they might not like break or snap or tear. But the one time you put an excess load, it will fail critically. Okay? That is the end of your archery career. I'm scaring you here, but not that I'm serious. Like, don't F up your shoulders. Don't F up your shoulders. Don't do it. You know, if you're shooting technique, and you're feeling like you're straighting this, stop. You're done. You're done. Like, you can't afford that. Actually, like, for those who remember, like a few months ago, I was sponsoring one of my ex-students, Jaram. It was going for the Youth World Championships for athletics. Champion guy, holds state records for like every athletic event. He's a massive athletic guy, and he had to withdraw because he had a hamstring injury, and he was shattered. He's like 19. He's such a talented guy, and he was so broken to miss out on the World Championships because of an injury. But his coach was pretty firm. If he evs up that hamstring now, that's surgery. And once you go surgery, you can't go back. So he's made the mature decision to sit out on the World Championships and go for the World University Games next year instead. Great guy. Yeah, same thing with archery, guys. Like, don't push your muscles. Unlike bones become stronger after you damage them. Okay, they get more dense. Muscles don't. If you destroy your muscles, they don't become stronger. They become weaker. Bones are different, but muscles are bad. Don't effort your muscles. I think we answered that question pretty well. Did I miss a question up here? Feathers to spin wings. Wings are easy to replace. They're cheap. They're getting easy to replace. Feathers tend to be damaged a lot easier. They're less consistent because they tend to fray more, like certain like fibers of the feathers get damaged more. I mean, feathers are great, but like veins are just so more consistent in their weight and thickness and design. There's one thing to point out with your logic, Chalasa. Having less forgiving equipment does not force you to get better form. The thing that people tend to miscalculate in this approach is you need to be able to accurately diagnose what you are doing. The problem of using less forgiving equipment is that it's harder to diagnose exactly what you're doing wrong. Is it you? Is it your process? Is it your mentality? Or is it your equipment? This is the argument or the discussion I had with my club members, because I mentioned in a previous live stream that what he did was he wanted to practice aligning the sight first before learning proper technique. Think about it. What's wrong with this is that he doesn't actually know if he's doing it right or wrong because his technique is very inconsistent. Nope, he pulls through the clicker, he ignores it, he shoots. He doesn't anchor properly, doesn't expand properly, and all he's doing is using the sight. That's all he's doing. So how does he know? Right? How does he know whether he's using the sight correctly or whether he's shooting incorrectly, but by chance the sight is in the right place? He doesn't know. So just be mindful with the whole idea of using more punishing equipment. It doesn't encourage you to shoot better. It mostly frustrates you, actually, honestly. Being realistic, it may frustrate you more than it teaches you. I'm not saying that what you're doing here is wrong or right. I'm just addressing the general attitude of using more difficult equipment. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what's the cause of bad shooting. Especially equipment is very hard to diagnose because we are always biased against our own technique. If we're shooting poorly, we think it's something we're doing wrong. So we focus on most of our attention on technique and process. But equipment is a chronic problem, and many people don't diagnose it correctly. Good examples, arrow spine. Like people people who don't know about arrow spine will try their best to shoot, but the arrows suck. They're not spined correctly or tuned correctly to the bow, and therefore you get the issue of the arrows don't do what the archer tells it to do, but they don't recognize that. So just be mindful of that. It's not as easy as I'll do this and therefore this will happen. A bit different there. Archery health benefits, low quality internet warrior. Firstly, mental, huge. Mental discipline, mental concentration, focus, health, very good. One of the big things of archery is that it's a physical activity. It's not like a shooting gallery where you're playing a mobile game and you're shooting bang, bang, bang. It's a physical sport. You need to be fit to do archery well. So it's a way for many people to engage in a physical activity that doesn't involve intensity. All right, like a lot of archers are introverted. A lot of archers like to be individualistic. They don't want to do a team sport. Most of our society is built around team sports, football, or the other football. Or of course, basketball, baseball, and so on. So a lot of team sports. But people who do archery like that, often like the individualistic side. But like, I want to play sport, but I don't like the team environment, like all the shouting and communication and the opposition and the contact. That can be off-putting for many people. So you can actually get quite a decent level of muscular strength from doing archery. Good example is, look at me, right? I'm a couch guy. I'm a PC. I'm a mouse potato. That's a word, right? I used to be a mouse potato, not a couch potato. A mouse potato. Spend all the time on the computer. Very skinny guy. I'm not saying I'm well built, but this is like what 5-6 years of archery. I've gone from like skinny skin and bone guy to average build, and I've got this unusual complex where I've got like pretty decent shoulders, and arms. I don't work out, right? This isn't my natural thing. I'm not flexing here. Yeah, now I'm flexing. But this is all archery. This isn't gym. This is just archery stuff. So over time, especially like the last few months, I've been training like from once a week to 4 times a week. You exert a lot. You build quite a good routine. Because remember, you don't just shoot. You have to like walk, fetch arrows, and like you have to do a lot of like it's not intense activity, but you shoot for the whole day. You're out there in the field. You're doing a lot of exertion. Yeah, like it's. I'm not saying I'm a muscular guy, but considering that I am the average Asian like skinny guy, it's significant to note that you do acquire some decent muscle tone and build from doing archery. Back muscles, especially the shoulders, get very strong. The back muscles are you get built up. It's significant. So if you want a physique, I mean, archery isn't the best thing, but archery does require strength. And that's why people really underestimate archers. Even historically, archers had to be very strong because you're using war bows, which are like 80 pounds plus. So you had to be strong to use a bow. One of the stereotypes is you give the bow to the weakest person and the sword to your strongest person. No, you actually give the bow to your strongest person and the sword to your weakest person. Okay, 'cause the sword requires more precision to use, a bow requires strength. So yeah, bowmen or archers tend to be quite strong. So big health benefit apart from mental health and discipline and focus. Like the big part is you actually get a decent physique from doing archery regularly. Now, a lot of archers are average. They have like big round stomachs and so on. Not saying every archer is going to be like like a Bruce Lee, like ripped fatigue, physique. But the average archer you see on the the TV, the Olympic Games, how most of them are quite slim and toned. They're not muscular. They're just toned. So yeah, I'm not Justin, by the way. You might be thinking of Justin Yuan from Raven Archery Club. I'm not him. I'm Asian, but I'm not Justin. I'm more often confused with Freddie Wong rather than Justin Yuan. It's funny because I've seen Justin and his photos because he has quite a presence on Facebook and he's been shooting quite well. He's actually shooting really well. I imagine, if I had to mistake someone who's NUSensei, I'd say Justin. I haven't met him, by the way, but I've just seen photos of him. Like he would be like the best replacement for me. Like if we were making like a NUSensei movie, a NUSensei movie, and we actually got a decent archer to play me, I'd probably pick Justin just because he looks like a much better version of me. Like he's a bit more like built up. He's got a slightly rounder face, wears glasses, has like nice, really cool hair. I think he looks like he's more. This may sound weird. I'm sorry, Justin, by the way, for pointing this out, but I think he's more good looking than me. I'd be a terrible screen character, right? But I reckon if I could pick someone to play me in a movie, as the average archer, I'd probably pick him because he's slightly better than I am. uh, where are we? David, a question. When you have a new shooter getting frustrated, do you back them up, do something that they're doing correctly to get their mind back into possible mindset? Then we'll back in later. Yes, David. This is basic teacher, right? Positive reinforcement is basic teacher principles. You've got to reinforce what they are doing well. I always have to preface everything I say. I don't like softening the blow, by the way. Like, feedback is feedback, but learners are learners. Okay, so I'm not gonna say doing something badly because if they don't know what they're doing, you can't say they're doing it badly. That is unfair judgment. So, I would typically reinforce what people are doing well. So I'll say, look, you have a good stance. Your timing is good. Your flow is quite good. You need some good rhythm. What I would recommend you do is try to anchor a little closer, right? Maybe to make it a little tighter into your face. And try to feel, and I'll walk them through the process. Okay. It might be I'll guide them through, and one thing about you don't touch people unnecessarily. So I might tap them on the shoulder. And one thing I liked doing was, like, for example, someone is drawing back. I'll tap their elbow here, and then I'll try and guide them in the right position with pressure, some slight pressure on the elbow, so that way you're not forced them to do it right. But some light contact, going to touch here. I'll say, all right, I'll guide you in. All right, now keep on pulling back until you feel right here. All right, it feels right. Okay, now when you're ready, do the shot, and they'll release that point. So of course you always reinforce good things, but it's kind of like you advise or you offer something new for them to try. I'm not saying do it this way. Say try this, try standing on this way, or try doing this. But yes, I always reinforce a positive. It's a natural teacher habit. I don't think about it anymore, just like I always do, because like the sign of someone who is either built for teaching or has a natural demeanor for teaching is the ability to be a fair judge. All right, a lot of people who do instructor courses to become instructors because they have to, or whatever, they look critically at people, and they are critical. Being critical is important for training someone, but to teach someone new, it isn't just about being critical. It's about being supportive and encouraging. And that's a fine balance. And a lot of people don't get that balance. They just say, oh, you're doing it wrong, do it this way. No, that's bad teaching. Good teaching is, let me help you do this. All right? No, you're doing this really well. Let me help you become better. That's a really important thing, is reinforce positives. Positive reinforcement is the foundation of a good teacher. Yeah, that's my quick answer for David's question there. What's that question from Salasa? What would be more important to have in decent quality? Riser, limbs, or arrows? Good question. In terms of spending money, riser. But in terms of the biggest effect on your score, arrows. Arrows are actually the biggest impact on your score. The riser is important to spend money on for a good riser. But the thing that affects your score the most is not the riser, it's the arrows. Okay. I think we'll take last question. It's been 2 hours now. A great stream, guys, by the way. I think this is one of the best Q&As. Mostly because I slept before I started, so I'm actually a little fresh right now. Plus some good matcha. Nice Japanese green tea. So I'll take the last course of questions. That was a really good session, and thanks everyone for joining me, by the way. I don't think we've had the stream this long that hasn't dragged on. It's been a pretty continuous barrage of questions, both the prepared ones and the live ones. And all there's been very good questions to ask, and hopefully those watching, I haven't acknowledged you, like you viewers who are watching this afterwards. Hopefully you get something out of this. I think every question here so far has been a good question. DJ, how do you balance wanting to win and enjoying? Archery isn't about winning. You need to tell yourself that. Archery is all about being better than yourself. It's not about win, because like in archery, you compete against other people, but you are only as good as yourself. Okay? You can only be better than yourself. You can't be better than anybody else, because what everybody else does has no impact on what you do. Everything you do in archery is owned by you. That is why archery is so appealing to many people. You can't blame the referee. You can't blame the other team or your teammates for being dumb and out of position. It's all you. It's all you. You simply don't have any excuse, and that's why for you, it's never about winning. Archery, you didn't start archery to win. You don't continue archery to win. Archery is something you do, is a journey. You always make progress. You have a pathway. You do archery because you want to do archery, not to win. Archery isn't competitive. You can compete in archery, but if all you're doing is competing, then you've lost what you did in the first place. You got to remind yourself of that, to remember, and this is a very big mental philosophy to keep in mind. Remember to shoot the arrow, not the score. That's my advice for you. Okay, I reckon we'll end it there. I've still got plenty of time left over, but it's been 2+ hours, so I want to make this a bit more digestible to the viewers who are watching afterwards. So thank you for joining me for this live stream. There will be more. I've got some time off next 2 weeks. I'll be doing more filming, more script writing, and getting more things organized. I do have enough videos to do a live stream for form checks. I've got like 3 or 4 to go through. So if you would like to get a form check, then I'll be doing a video over the next few days, I think. I'm not gonna push it too far back too soon, but I will be doing a live form check video very shortly after this one. So if you want to jump in for that one, then please do so. And of course, feel free to send in form videos to get feedback and so on. But again, thank you for everyone for joining me on this archery Q&A. It's been a very good pleasure. Thank you for everyone in chat for contributing questions and answers and more questions and so on. It's been a very good discussion. Probably, I think, one of the best ones so far. We're getting more and more people and more questions, which is absolutely fantastic. And of course, we all learn from each other. That's really the message to think about here is, I'm here to offer an avenue, a forum for people to share their archery experiences and questions and concerns. And hopefully you've all learned something from this experience. Anyway, of course, as usual, I am your host and presenter, NUSensei, and hopefully we'll see you next time.